Good morning.
Morning.
Hi, Soraya. Hi,
Good
Reverend. Hi, Bridget.
Carla. Hey, Phoebes.
Hi, Phoebes.
Morning.
Hey, Soraya.
Phoebes, you froze.
Again, I think I might have to
Mm,
be off camera. I
okay.
tried to use my other internet, but okay.
Okay.
Does that sound better, at least?
It's always sounded okay. It's the
Just
video, it's the
my
image. It
face.
freezes. Yeah.
My face is frozen. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't need my weird frozen face on YouTube forever, so I'm gonna stay off camera and yeah, I'll be just fine. Yeah, thanks, Soraya, Reverend Brown, for being here. On Monday, we had Brittany, Jennifer, Trey, Susanna, and Gail. So 5 of the 11 members came Monday. I think there's a few more folks who had indicated this time worked. So yeah, so we'll give folks a few minutes. I think it'll give us till 10:05 just to see who else might roll in before we kick off. But welcome. Thank you for being here. Can you see my screen? I had shared the agenda. I don't know why it doesn't show me what I'm showing, but
Yes.
I can see the screen. It has the agenda at the top. It says agenda.
Okay.
Today's
Yeah.
date.
Thank you.
All
Great.
of that.
Okay. And I will just a reminder, this is a public meeting. Although we will be under quorum, so we won't be making any major group decisions today, more of a brainstorming meeting. And I just dropped in the chat a link to a folder where you'll be able to access documents that we might talk about today. The agenda's in there, some background materials that might be helpful to consult as we talk about advisory council roles, and we want to see your role really look like in concrete terms, which is really the intention with this call. Get a little bit more specific around how we want to see you all empowered to be a voice of the communities you represent, both directly and by connecting with those communities, and then also how we then become a bridge from those communities' voices actually influencing policy at the agencies. So welcome, Mariana. I was just giving some meeting context, but we're mostly just waiting for folks to roll in. So welcome.
Good morning, Mariana.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. Was just trying to join, and it was not letting me. But I'm glad I'm here.
We're glad you're here too. Reverend, your hand is up. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, this is about. I'm less familiar with Teams, so there are 2 questions that I have, and they will. One is more serious than the other. If I like to use one device to do a meeting, and then another device like to pull up documents and so on. So Phoebes, the documents for the meeting, would they, if I were to go on to Teams on another device, would those documents be in there in a file folder or something like that, or is it just that you only just put them in the chat function right now? Is that right?
Reverend, what I
The
can
links
do
in the
is
chat.
send you, yeah,
And
but
I'm
what
sorry,
I can do,
you don't have
Phoebes,
to call me Reverend, by the way. You can call me
okay.
Walter. Thank you.
Okay, so what I can do is actually send you the materials in an email right now, so
Great.
that,
Thank you. Terrific.
okay, I will do that right now.
The other question is more whimsical, but again, I don't use Teams as much. So like with the gestures, like your hands, thumbs up, are they, can you do like in Zoom where you can skin tone adjust, or is that, I mean, someone can just send that to me in the chat or whatever. I don't want to take up time for folk. Or is it, or does Microsoft not give you that option? Maybe no one knows.
Yeah. I wasn't sure actually. I haven't seen it. It doesn't automatically pop up the way it does on Zoom on Teams. I don't know that it's buried somewhere there that we could enable it. So that's something I can check
No
for.
worry. I can always ask
yeah.
my consultant Google, but whatever. Thank you. No worries.
No, thank you for raising it. It's a good thing for me to look at for future meetings, just to have that option available in the settings. All right. Well, it's 10:06 now, so I'm going to go ahead and have us get started just because we expect to be a small group. And I'm, looking forward to, and I appreciated what Monday provided in terms of just the level of detail that we can kind of get into and back and forth that can happen in a small group setting. It's a little bit of a wild card of who's in the room. So there's definitely one of those, this is definitely one of those opportunities, as Adrienne Marie Brown puts it, of, there's a conversation only the people in this room can have, find it sort of situation, so we need to see between the three members that we do have here, Zaraya, Walter, Mariana, just what sort of areas of connection there are with your all roles specifically. And it was asked at the last meeting how we would connect the dots between the Monday conversation and today's conversation. So my offer at Monday's meeting was, as always, to share the recording and the meeting notes with everyone from both meetings, but also to put together kind of a higher level summary of kind of key themes and where there was some overlap and or not across the group, so folks could see the big picture of the conversations. So I'll do that, and then just sort of create an invitation for follow-up conversation. I also want to acknowledge that Mariana very graciously reached out with my ask if anybody wanted to support facilitation with the meeting today. And so she and I got to brainstorm a little bit about how to take the fairly ambitious and broad agenda topics that I have. Let me put those back up here for us to work on today, and just sort of come up with some more specific prompts or discussion points that we might want to get into. So Mariana, we found Monday was a fairly free-flowing conversation. I imagine today will be too, but I really invite you and all of you, Zaraya and Walter as well, to take the reins if you feel like there's a direction you think the conversation wants to go, and just let me know. I'm here to pretty loosely facilitate. I would love for us to just do a quick round of introductions. We don't currently have any members of the public on this meeting, but I do want to give Bridget and Sophie a chance to also just quickly introduce themselves. They work with Carla and I at the Agency of Natural Resources, and then we can get into just quickly review our community agreements and then get into the agenda and make sure we feel good about that. Oh, and looks like we do have one member of the public who joined. Okay, great. So I will just kick off our intros. As usual, just name any identifiers that are helpful, how you'd like to be referred to, just what capacity you are here in. So as an advisory council member or state agency support staff or member of the public, and anything else about that you want to share. And then just one thing in the environment that you're feeling grateful for today. So I can go first, and I'll put those prompts in the chat for folks like me with memory challenges. But my name is Phoebes Potter. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. I'm here in a support role as the Environmental Justice Coordinator with the Agency of Natural Resources. And today I am holding gratitude for the resilience of all of my chickens and goats who live here with me for managing the cold. They're more resilient than I am, I think. That's why it took me a minute. I'm feeling that cold this morning, doing farm chores at 5:30, but they are amazing, and I'm grateful that they find ways to stay warm when I'm not quite sure how to do it for them. So they all made it through the night, which is great. And I will pass to Walter. I want to go next.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Walter Brownridge. I'm a member of the Environmental Justice Advisory Council. appointed by the Speaker of the House as a member of one of the, I always get confused, focus group populations that the legislation is supposed to have representation on this. My pronouns are he, him, they. I work, my day job, I'm an Episcopal priest and former lawyer who I work for the Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Vermont, and one of my two of my portfolio areas are one around racial justice and healing, as well as what we call care of creation, our environmental ministry. So glad to be on this body with you all.
Thanks, Walter. Mariana?
Yes, thank you, Phoebes. Good morning, everyone.
Oh.
Thank you all.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I forgot to give a gratitude.
Yes, yes.
I'm grateful today that even though it was late, that the seasons have kicked in and that it is fall, and even the falling of the leaves, which is sometimes an irritant to me, but I'm grateful for that anyway. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no,
Not at all. Thank you.
no problem. I was actually going to say that I was grateful for your presentation. That was so thoughtful, and I really like the different areas in which you do work. And my name is Mariana. I work for Hunger Free Vermont, and I am within this council in the capacity of food security advisor, or representing people that struggle with food security issues. And I am originally from Argentina, so English is my second language, and I'm also here a little bit in the capacity of someone who whose English is not the first language, and have a little bit of the experience of the immigrant or the newcomer. So I wear different hats. And I am grateful for a yoga class I went this morning. Oh la la, that was so beautiful. I was the only student. So the teacher was all on me and I was all stretchy and it was fantastic. So yeah, that's it. Oh, and I use her, he, she, her pronouns, or anything you want to call me, that's fine.
Thanks, Mariana.
Mm-hmm.
Soraya?
Hi, everyone. Zaraya Hightower, she, her pronouns. I'm the municipal representative and also a city councilor in Burlington, Vermont. I am specific to the environment. I'm at least grateful. I've had a roommate for the last month, and she left this morning, so now I'm back at my desk, which has the big window, and it feels like it's one. I don't have a lot of light in my apartment, so it's like the most light-filled space in the room. So I'm excited to have that back. Grateful to have that back. Thanks.
Great. And then Carla?
Good morning, Carla Raimundi, she, her. I work at the Agency of Natural Resources. I was designated the representative of the Agency of Natural Resources by Secretary Moore to the Interagency Committee, which is another body that was created by Act 154 of 2022, or the Vermont Environmental Justice Law. So that's one hat I wear. For purposes of this meeting, I will be providing technical support to the extent possible. I am really not that good at that. I'll do my best. And I am grateful for I am actually quite grateful for the domestication of dogs, and I am grateful for my doggie, Olive. This morning, it was so cold, but she was so happy. because it was that cold that she did the zoomies. She just started running in circles, so excited, and there was snow on the ground, and she was rolling on the snow. So I'm very grateful for that, because I went in 0.5 seconds. I went from, oh my God, it's so cold, there's snow on the ground already, to, oh wow, this is incredible. Olives loves it, and it's so beautiful. So I'm grateful for doggies and the incredible bond that has been developed over many years with us.
Thanks, Carla. Bridget.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bridget Phillips. I work in the Department of Environmental Conservation in the Accessible Assistance Office with Megan Cousineau and Emily Rogers, who you may have seen on these calls before. So I am, as part of my role, I am the one of the liaisons in the environmental justice, as well as I'm on the working group. So I'm here today to take notes and, be support role. And I work with Carla and Phoebes in the capacity of providing support for Act 154 deliverables. And what else? Oh, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm very grateful for water. I took up swimming recently to heal a back injury, and I never really liked swimming before, but it's pretty magical how every time I get in the water, my joints and muscles just feel so much better. And just thinking about, I've worked in the drinking water protection division for 7 years, and now I have a different relationship with water in a healing sense, and I'm really grateful for that. And happy to be here today.
Thanks, Bridget. I very much appreciate you being here to support. Sophie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sophie. I use she, her pronouns. I recently began working with the Climate Action Office, a close collaborator with Phoebes and Carla in the Environmental Justice Office here at the Agency of Natural Resources. So I'm excited to be listening in today and very inspired by the work you all are doing. Yesterday, as I was driving through to the Champlain Valley, there's a lot more oak trees, and I was able to notice and appreciate that because they hang on to their leaves for so much longer, and also the locust. And I was feeling grateful for that very unique perspective on the landscape, to kind of see like this one patch of tree and be able to like see how that tree, it's sort of like just highlighting, if you were to say, oh, show me where all the oaks are, like we just get this one moment of the year where we get to see that, and not every tree does that. So I was enjoying and delighting in that. I'm grateful that the oak trees hold on to their leaves for longer.
Sophie. I always feel about beech trees also. And Katie, welcome you. We're a small group. If you want to say hi and introduce yourself, you're welcome to do so.
Thanks. Hi, Katie Gallagher. Use she, her pronouns. I'm sorry, I'm keeping my camera off because I'm having some internet troubles. But here's a member of the public, and I direct the Sustainable Communities Program with the Vermont Natural Resources Council, which is a statewide environmental nonprofit, and really just here to learn. We are hoping to learn more about how we can be best supportive in the environmental justice field in Vermont. So just been trying to track these meetings to see how we can be most helpful and figure out where we can engage. And I am grateful for one aspect of the environment. We had a wood delivery this morning, so I'll say that I am grateful to have a local sustainable source of heat, which I came to most appreciate last year when the power was out, and you can still have heat in your homes, which is, and have it, come from within a 50-mile radius, which is pretty cool. So thank you all for your work, and happy to be here.
Thanks, Katie. Great. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate taking the time to do that and just having a minute to hear from each other. So yeah, we're at 10:20. And as I mentioned, the agenda items are just sort of two general broad questions, just giving ourselves some space to brainstorm more. What do we want community? How do you all as an advisory council want to structure yourselves to and partner with the support around you, both myself, Carla, A&R, the interagency committee, to do community engagement throughout the implementation of this law effectively, but also, in doing that, be sort of a liaison to be in the room influencing state policy based on what you're hearing from the community. And that's often sort of the missing link in a lot of community engagement efforts. And so I think it's important for us to think about both sides of the equation at the same time. I am just going to drop in the chat and, in the interest of time, just for reference, if folks want to see them, our community agreements that we have. But I really would like us to jump into if the hearing from Zoraya and Walter and Mariana about maybe some of the specific goals within those broad topics you would have in this meeting today. We have about an hour and a half left. And I also wanted to invite, during Monday's meeting, there was an ask just to revisit some of the conversation from our last meeting about legislative priorities and the extension on the due dates, and recognizing that might impact how we're working. So I just would love to know if any of the three of you would like to have a minute at the beginning of our meeting to touch base about that topic specifically, and it's fine if not, but just so we can sort of equalize the agenda between Monday and today. So yeah, I'm going to just sort of open the floor to the three of you. Maybe we can just each go around and share if you have any specific goals for today that we can try and get to.
I'm happy to start. And for me, I guess the most interesting thing, I think the community engagement, meaningful participation, I always think it's great to have intentions and to name them, but then I think often it's when it comes to practice that people that like intention is different than like what we actually end up doing. So I'm more eager, and I think I've said this every time, but I'm more eager just to like start doing stuff. And then when people are like, hey, it doesn't feel like this is meeting your intentions, like I think it's less about perfectly articulating the intention than getting even close to doing the intention in practice. So I don't have a lot to say in that. So I'm really would like to get to the how we're working with the agencies and what we're doing next. So I would spend the bulk of the time on that. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And do you feel good around the legislative pieces? Any space for that?
I would lie if I've said that I've looked at it.
Oh, that's okay. There's like multiple pathways. I think it was sort of this question about what the 2-year statutory extension would mean in practice, but it sounds like we could maybe follow up with that after this meeting instead of taking up time now and just focus on the other pieces. Okay, great. Cool. Mariana or Walter, your goals for today?
Walter, were you saying something? I think your mic is muted. We can't hear you.
You're muted.
Still muted, I think, Walter.
Sorry. I'm
there it is.
Teams. I was just saying, go ahead, Mariana, you can go ahead, please, and I'll follow you.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with Zoraya a lot. Like I'm not looking for getting any perfected intentions verbatim. I don't know if that's exactly what you were saying, but I agree that yeah, I'm ready to start working, and then when things happen, we can redirect or feel like if anything needs to be said in terms of setting up intentions. In terms of the two questions that you mentioned, specifically fees, if I if I'm correct, you ask what would be the structure that we would like to, or the support that we would like to see or that we need in order to do community engagement about our work with this council. And in other words, so you're trying to tell us how do we want to engage with the public in these meetings, or both? How do we want to make sure that we're bringing the public when the agencies are discussing important things that has to do with the law? So it probably both, but just making sure that there may be two different things there. I don't know if others see it that way too. So I would like to make sure that maybe we set up whoever is interested, maybe a subcommittee, or just it could be one or two persons, or you at the agency, your support, whoever is providing us support could be the ones taking a lead to draft different language when in terms of community engagement for these meetings, and for when the time comes to meet with the agencies and when more relevant discussions are being talked about. I would like to see somebody with eyes on very simple, very familiar language in order to do community outreach about these meetings and these other ones. And I don't know, this is not maybe what we're looking for to discuss right now, but as something that I would like to throw out there. Who's having the eyes on simple language, drafting different communication words, just to get out there the work that we're doing. And also, I would like to see if the council can compile, and this is a little bit what I was trying to tell you before, Phoebes, compiled a list of the different spaces, networks, and groups that we work with, occupied besides the council, outside the council, and make sure that that is compiled and that we can visualize if that is wide enough in scope to make sure that we're reaching out to enough people, and we all commit to, when there's something to communicate that is relevant and that we're really looking for community engagement, we can send that clear, friendly language that somebody drafted into all these communities and networks that we know that we are familiar with, so that the message will be distributed among the communities, whatever the message is, whether it is that we're asking folks to engage with us as a council, or that we're asking folks, this is going to be discussed by this agency, and we're going to be there as representative of communities. Please join us to elevate your voice. And so, yeah, and I'm in terms of how to be the liaison between the public and the agencies implementing this law, I'm not sure about that. I don't have the specific thoughts, but maybe hearing what Walter or Zoraya has to say about that, I would say communication would be the best way to be liaisons, but for that we need to have a structure in place. Like, what are we asking? Where is the language? Where do we sending it? And then later, you see evaluating that first step. That if that's a first step, we could reassess and say, nobody's really showing up in these meetings. People are not learning what we're doing. People are not elevating their voices. What is it that they need to do that then? Maybe compensation, childcare, thinking about ways of we coming to the communities in different ways, knocking on their doors to ask for permission to share their spaces and bring what we need to say, if we need to say something or communicate something, or bring the information that we're seeing being discussed at the different agencies when implementing this law. And we are the messengers. We're coming here to this meeting that it's a church meeting, whatever meeting it is, and we are spreading the word that this is happening in these agencies that people need to know. Yeah, I guess that's another idea, was to use the resources we have to hire a third-party organization that does community engagement and has networks around Vermont to help us with this project too. I guess there is some money available for us to spend, and maybe that's also something that we would like to look into, you know, getting a partner to do this part, the liaison and the community engagement, the drafting of the friendly language. What I would not like to see is just you know, like the state website saying next meeting that day and that time. Whereas like, that doesn't sound invited. Why would I go there? I can barely, as a member of the public, that I'm not engaged with any of this technical language, that those websites are intimidating, non-inviting. It doesn't seem like they really want my voice as a mom with my kids. You know, I'm thinking, putting my other hat, you know, like, you're busy, you have things to do. Oh, you really want my opinion? That doesn't even, I don't even go there as a parent. I never visit the state websites to learn about meetings that I may need to participate, because they will impact my life, because they will impact my mobile home or my neighborhood or the parks in which my kids go. Yeah, and oh gosh, I rumble all over the place. So good luck with following with that. But yeah, given that we're just a few members, I thought that I could rumble a little bit, if you all allow me. Thank you. And I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Mariana. Thebes, should I go next? Is that what?
Yeah, by all means. Yeah, I'm just taking notes as y'all talk, and we'll happily sort of recap some of the takeaways, but I think we've touched on a lot of great stuff. So yeah, go for it.
Well, part of what I'm thinking, there are folks in this space. For example, the counselor who deals with constituents in Burlington very regularly, and others who have connections to, you know, maybe community groups. And I do think if there's funding available, and I want to circle back to funding, because that's probably my most I think important, you know, factor in this, you know, community groups that are able to bring people out for, you know, an organization I'm quite familiar with, who this issue of environmental justice has not been on their radar as much as other issues in the state. But because it does touch upon equity, they probably would get involved if interested. Is like Vermont Interfaith Action, who are able to reach out because it's, you know, a organization that is represented largely by people in the faith-based organizations and communities. They have a way of getting out to people, and even where their organization doesn't necessarily have inroads in certain communities, they can direct us. So but I think, I'm sure others in this room can do the same. I think that's really important, as much as I say beat the bushes, to get people. And I think it has to be not just pushing out communication, but then trying to pull people in who will be able to give meaningful participation directly. I mean, I just think that's key to community engagement. But the other piece, this is just in some of my research, and when I look at the potential action steps that we're taking, I think that's really great. But what I of course, always concerned about is we talked a lot at the last meeting I was at about the question around stipends. And I'm not going to talk about stipends, but I am going to talk about funding that I think the success of this will depend upon being able to fund the kind of outreach and community engagement that we'll need to get meaningful participation. And one of my part of my research is I always talk to one of my old law school classmates, which is now 35 years ago or something like that. She just semi-retired from the Sierra Club. She was probably maybe the first Black lawyer to work at Sierra Club, decades ago. But she's been in the forefront nationally and even internationally around environmental justice. And what she indicated to me is that currently, because of what the Biden administration and Congress was able to do in the Inflation Reduction Act, there's finally money, federal money available that there's never been before since Congress, passed the environmental justice legislation in the 90s, right? There's money now available. So there are resources. And my real question, and maybe Councilor Zariah can add, in far as the state and their intergovernmental relations office of being able to see how we, because I'm sure in the, in those buckets of money, there's probably funding available, because I know the issue within the state is around, how much money we'll have. But if there's a way to get federal money to enhance this, I think that's really important. And whether that's through A&R or intergovernmental relations or a combination, to look to that, I just think would be really helpful. And that could do things like if we need to contract with a community-based organization, or we need to do other things that can help get community members, particularly among our focused populations, to be involved. So that's just my only thing that in my review of your of the work that's been done so far. And if someone's talked about this before, I apologize that I haven't been at every meeting, so I may have missed something. Thank you.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that is that there's a lot of federal money right now, and I obviously don't know who at the state or with an A&R is like keeping their eye on that and like what capacity there is to apply for it. It's obviously a it's obviously like a slow process to get additional funds in terms of like applying for it, waiting for the review, getting it, and so and I guess like I assume we've got lots of people at the state who are scanning for opportunities and additional ways to pay for it. And I think sometimes the best way to get on the radar for that is to be doing like good work and being like, oh, we've got a plan and a vision. And that's the only thing that I know. Obviously I don't have a lot of insight into how successful Vermont has been as a state on capturing some of those funds.
Yeah, thanks, Soraya. Yeah, it's a great point, Walter, and it's not one that we've really talked about yet, but it absolutely is something that we should strategically be thinking about in this work. It would fall within our unit at the Agency of Natural Resources and the EJ coordinator's responsibilities as part of being like technical support providers to sort of pursue those opportunities. That said, it doesn't have to get bottlenecked there. I'm also thinking of our interagency committee. So we have 11 different state agencies all tied to this work who could also be thinking about pursuing funds and connecting the funds that they might already have or would be pursuing to this work. So I think with funding, so maybe let's just do a recap on where we're at with funding, because I think it's just important context clearly. There is currently, all right, first let me drop a document. Actually, I'm gonna share my screen really quickly. 1 minute. Okay, let me know when you can see this slide. It says budget for the environmental justice law. If you can see that.
Not yet.
Very slow. Hopefully it'll pop up. I'll just start talking. But essentially there was $500,000 one-time funding allocated to this work at the beginning of when the law passed. That is meant to support the community engagement and development of the environmental justice mapping tool, which based on a lot of sort of analysis from other states that have built mapping tools, 350,000 is like a low ball estimate to start making a basic map. Like there are states that have spent millions of dollars to do more advanced mapping projects. So we sort of expect, so we wanted to hold a baseline level of funding that would let us get a contractor on board to sort of help us with the facilitating and building and conceptualizing of the tool, and then put 150,000 of that into community engagement. This was sort of an internal A&R determination. So it's not, you know, set statutorily or anything. We have flexibility. We figured to start with $150,000 dedicated to community engagement. And we also ended up with $150,000 of additional carryover because we were so delayed in hiring positions that are paid for in the budget as well. So that there is a little bit of play there that will probably be higher now, even with Alex stepping down. So yeah, so there is money right now that is ours explicitly to spend. That's within A&R's budget. Like we sort of are the keepers of the funds, but you all as the advisory council are the ones who, you know, would sort of activate, let's spend it. This is how we want to spend it. And then we would do the work to make that happen. To Mariana's point, there are a lot of things around community engagement our agency is not positioned to do nimbly and or at all sometimes, such as stipends, such as childcare provision. So we've been talking about, and the workaround for that has been to have a request for proposal to go out for community-based organizations to sort of operate in that sort of third-party role where funding can go to them, and then they can buy gift cards, they can run raffles, they can book spaces, things like that. So that is a useful discussion point, I think, for us to touch on. And Zoraia, I know you've brought some thoughts to this in particular in prior meetings, so I'd love to like use this time to talk about that. So that's one piece of the funding equation. And this funding does not include salaries for myself and the other EJ coordinator. That's a separate pool of funding. So you have 2 full-time positions of people who can work on this, plus this funding. And then, you know, the reality is that there are a lot of agencies, state agencies that are already operating budgets and program staff for community engagement purposes that I think we could probably leverage in this work. So I think it'd be really helpful for our interagency committee members to also let you all know, hey, this is who we have doing public engagement at our agency right now. Their job is to communicate, you know, relevant policies in plain language. Their job is to go to community events. So I think we could probably tap into some existing resources beyond this. And then finally, to your point, Walter, we can always pursue additional grant funding and state funding to just supplement the work overall. And I think it'd be really healthy for there to be a base, like a regular base budget ongoing, apologies, base budget for in community engagement long term. This is one-time funding. So once we spend it, then what? So I think we also need to think about an approach for advocating for there to be base budget funding for engagement for this work in the future. So again, that's something that takes time to build a proposal and advocate for and do that. But that's sort of the funding context. If we want to kind of continue on that piece. Yeah, I'll stop sharing so we can see each other's faces. Go ahead, Mariana.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask about what you were sharing.
Oh, sorry.
Well, no. You don't have to. Maybe you can help me by reading it again. What is the difference between, in the allocations for community engagement, what is the difference between access to public meetings and the other advisory, I cannot remember now by heart, but there
Yeah.
were 2 parts. And how can those 2 be used, and or what do they mean that I am not knowing?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't clarify that. So within the 150,000, our thought was that we could put 40,000 of that into sort of our public meetings, facilitation support, more accessible venues, like kind of making that space in particular. And I would love to get into how we can make these meetings more accessible in 2024 as part of this meeting today. The other part, the 110,000, represented essentially saying, what if each counselor essentially had $10,000 at their disposal to say to A&R, hey, here's how I think it would be good to reach my constituency group. And if y'all want to team up and do that, you know, it doesn't have to be so cut and dry. But that was kind of the idea, that we have at least $10,000 per advisory counselor set up to be able to do more engagement outside of public meeting context, going to existing events, hosting a forum, sort of all those other supplemental things beyond our public meetings. Thank you for clarifying that. And that is, again, just a suggestion. Y'all can, those numbers can move around. Those are not set in any, those are not rules. Those are just sort of some suggestions to get us to think about what our resources are. I think the punchline to me is we have resources and we're not really spending any of it. And maybe to Zariah's point is, you know, because we're trying to always have the perfect plan in place, when it's like, let's just start trying some things on and pick some priorities and start to chip away at this and see what works or doesn't work.
And to that, can I add something else that I mentioned to you this before, Fifth, and maybe it's a good time to bring it back, and if not, let it go. But for me, it feels like I would like people to be engaged when we are really talking. And maybe this is what you were saying, Soraya, and I'm putting it in different words. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I would not like to have a lot of people participating in these conversations about conversations and conversations about engagement and I don't know how long we've been doing this already, and it's great that we're doing it, and we're taking the time to set the ground to have great conversations about community engagement. But I feel like we need to bring people on board when we are talking specifically about things that it will impact their lives. Such as, are we talking about the park in which the kid is going to play? Are we talking about the lake the kid is going to swim? Are we talking about the transportation that will take the old person to the supermarket that is far away from her rural town? I want to see this money going to people who is going to inform us how to create those spaces better for them. And I don't know if maybe we are all thinking the same thing, but I just needed to say it because I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm not sure what are we talking about. And maybe it's me because I'm not so trained in this like type of meetings, like with the state and laws and these type of things. But I would like to see this money going to the people who are going to really tell us what do they need from us, how we make environmental justice just for that, like how we and the agencies apply this law to change their lives effectively and meaningfully. And so I don't know if that's what this money is for, but yeah, that's what I'm hoping at some point. And I don't know when that would be, but.
Yeah. Yeah, no, what you're saying makes a ton of sense. That is what this money is for, both and. It really is flexible. We want you all to set the priorities and then we can operationalize that. And so what you're describing is it makes a ton of sense to me. I think it's exactly where I'm trying to go, which is, how do we proactively sort of identify forums or spaces where we're getting into the actual policy issues, and make those spaces accessible and set those things up well. So, Carl, I saw your hand was up. Did you want to jump in?
Yes. And to continue expanding on this point, we would look at advisory council members who represent their communities to let us know what would work or the best path forward to actually connect effectively with the communities that you'll represent. And so that feedback is the feedback that will allow us to decide how we move forward. If there's stipends that are recommended to be paid, which I assume is the case, then we need to create an RFP, a request for proposal, and that needs to be fleshed out, and then it has to go out, and that's a process that takes about 6 months. But we need the feedback from advisory council members to guide us on the best way to reach the communities that you represent. And so this is the context for this conversation, is based on your expertise and the knowledge that you have of the communities that you work with and represent. What kind of structure needs to be in place so that we are engaging with those members effectively? And then depending on the feedback that we get, then we can actually structure an RFP and identify the organization or entity that will help us advance this work in a connected fashion. And that money that's set aside, the 150, is to support that. And another component that would be supported by the 40 is language access.
Thanks, Carla. Go for it, Sarah.
Yeah, sorry, just a question that I have is where we are on time, like, and I don't know, I think I might have missed the last meeting that we did. I don't know if I missed it or if they were just canceled. I don't remember the timelines anymore for our last meetings. Where are we on, like, we'd had a conversation around like how we were going to work with the agencies, if that was going to be, like if we're going to kind of like try to divvy it up, or like how we were going to do that. But what is their timeline for when they're giving us something substantive to review? Because I feel like that's like, I guess, like, you know, like to Mariana's point of like, you know, we don't want to have involve them in conversations about like conversations we're gonna have. And so it's like, what is the time? But I do think it's important to develop some of the relationships for what, so that when we have the conversation, it's ready to have. But it's like, until I know when we will have something and what we will have, it's hard to have a thing about being like, hey, I want to talk to you because I know that in like February, we're going to have this thing where we want your feedback. And so, okay. Phoebe's like, I send you all of this stuff all of the time and you just don't look at it.
No. It takes a lot. It takes a lot. I can barely keep up with what I send, so like no pressure there. But I do think this speaks a little bit maybe to what you're asking, and I'm going to drop the link in the chat so that folks can just look at it on their own device as well. But yeah, I hear you. Yes, it's like, okay, well, when do the substantive decisions get made that we want to plug into? And I think that needs to get mapped out. And it's a little bit hazy right now because we are also, and we did talk about this in the last meeting, about sort of looking for an across the board statutory extension of the due dates. Because quite frankly, we're behind on all of them at this point. So we need to recalibrate them for there to be any meaningful accountability. And we are trying to think about what that recalibration should be. We talked about a 2-year recalibration statutorily, so like just across the board 2-year push out, with the knowledge and assumption that we can set interim due dates within that, based on what's reasonable. So, the draft principles for core engagement are basically done. We don't need to wait 2 years to send them out, but we are going to need extra time to complete some really major deliverables. So that's just like, that's one of the conversations that happened. Just in terms of like what's going on, so I'll just talk through this document in terms of this is like what the law specifically names as where the advisory council should be weighing in on policy. So around community engagement plans, right? There's the creation of the core principles of community engagement. But then it specifically says advisory council will advise covered agencies during the development of their community engagement plan. So that in and of itself leaves a lot of interpretation or a lot of room for like flexibility around when and how you all, like, forget even the people you know, bringing in more people you represent, but even just the 11 of you all, how do we set you up in a good way to be at the table across 11 state agencies who are all writing community engagement plans based on those principles? So what I would like to do in my role is create sort of a set of interim process steps for the covered agencies from the day they get those core principles of engagement to the day that their plans are due. That contemplates you will meet with a subgroup of advisory council members who are focused on housing issues because you are the Department of Housing. You will meet with all the other interagency committee members at least once every 4 months to talk about cross-agency issues and sharing resources. There will be a webinar on this topic to talk with folks about language access at some point in our, so there's all, to me, it's like the process. I'm asking you all now how you want to be engaged so that I can think of a way to present the expectations of covered agencies now, and we can start to get in motion scheduling and things like that.
How many?
So that's just one piece. Yeah.
How many of us are there, and how many agencies are there?
I think it's 11 and 11. It does match up that way. 11 covered state agencies, 11 counselors. Yeah.
It's 10,
But there's
10 agencies and the Office of Racial Equity.
Okay.
Okay, so and ORE is also on advisory council. So 10
Correct.
and 10
then,
if you sort of cancel out
ORE, the Office of Racial Equity, has a member within the advisory council, and that is Susana.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, as much as what you said sounds great, Phoebes, I don't know if that is in the, like, I don't think that was in the community engagement principles. So I wouldn't want to create like another document. I almost feel like, I know that we took forever to get to like the community principles, but I think even just editing that, if that's one of the things, then putting that in, I just don't want to create another process document. So to some extent, I would advocate for us, and I know that this is really hard because I know some folks, like, I don't know, it's like we get paid like $6 an hour or something like that for work outside of these meetings, which is, so it's like, I do think that it's like, we have to just start building relationships with whoever the agency contact is, and we can't do that 11 to 11. I mean, we can, but that's like a very time intensive, like very, like, so I would almost just say like, try to start doing the matching of like 2 people per 2 agencies, so that all of us have 2 agencies and every agency has 2 people, and then like start to build relationships on like, what are you like, because I think that is where the substantive work is. And if we're spending too much time trying to figure out like exactly what it like could look like without having the conversation like cross the actual agencies, then I think it's just going to take a very long time. And I don't know how to do that in a way that feels good to all of the members, given that they're not necessarily like, that they're not really going to be compensated for it. So I know that you're also trying to push the compensation question, but yeah, that's it. But I think that's the structure that we're trying to go to. And then I think having those conversations at the agency level to be like, where are you? What are you confused about? What are your big questions? Because that'll help us to start plan out like what community engagement could look like that's actually meaningful.
Right. That makes a ton of sense to me. I would love Mariana and Walter to be able to weigh in on that, but I also want to pause because we're at about 11 a.m., which is when we scheduled public comment times. So, Katie, if you had anything you wanted to bring public comment wise or reflections of what you've heard, this is your moment. And all good if not.
Thanks. And I actually am going to have to jump in a minute, so this is good timing. this is not really a fully formed question yet, but I think I just wanted to flag that there's been some conversations that I've been hearing around policy development in the environmental sphere that are kind of planning on the agencies having a certain amount of this work done within, I think, the existing time frame. And so I'm feeling like for us and some of our advocacy partners, having this understanding of the timeline being pushed back and whether it makes sense to attach to legislation that will be considered in the upcoming session, some parameters or requirements that we would ultimately expect to see when the law is in full force and the agencies have had the time to get through all of this. So kind of just trying to figure out like the timing, which I know that you're also still figuring out, and whether it makes sense to kind of push back our reliance on the agencies having done some of this work. Again, that was a very rambling, not fully formed thought, but just kind of wanted to put it out there as something that I'm thinking about, and how we're going to be developing policy in relation to agencies actually having a strong environmental justice and community outreach component to it.
I think it made sense, and if someone, I could try to reword what you said to make sure that I got it.
Yes, please.
But not being I may not be the best prepared person to do that, but maybe but you trying to hold on, you trying to make sure that if within these groups we push back our timelines, that will not affect important policy that will be discussed in the meantime by these agencies that we are going to include in this work, because what's going to happen if that happens, because they will not have the things in place to consider environmental justice. Is that
Yeah,
too brief?
No, I think that's right. And again,
can you give an example, like, of what you're thinking? Like, if there's a policy that you're thinking in a certain agency that you would like to see that environmental justice principles and community engagement are in place to impact that particular policy, would that help?
Yeah, so the kind of idea that I've been hearing is, well, we should, if we're pursuing policy X, then we should be requiring agency or agencies X, Y, and Z to have certain environmental justice policies or requirements in place. And then the response to that was, well, we have the environmental justice law that will be requiring them to do certain things. And so I guess my question at this point is we're not, again, not really a question, but just kind of thinking about how to maybe thread that gap of timing where this work is ongoing, and we don't want to kind of undermine it by adding other requirements into a policy when there's already this existing process, but it might just be taking a little bit longer than we had initially anticipated.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Katie. And I think this is a great conversation. I would love to sort of follow up and touch base with you, because right now we're all sort of in the process of considering, what are the right deadlines and things like that that we want to hold, and just recognize before the Vermont's EJ law was passed, we already were operating in a space where environmental justice was relevant, was showing up in policy expectations, is infused through federal funding requirements. It's not like so I understand there's complexity in how these things are all interconnected. And I think I really appreciate you considering we don't want to add another legislative requirement of agencies that is sort of a similar one to the one that just passed in the law, and then we're just adding more and more complexity that sort of slows the whole thing down. So that's really important. So I think if you're willing, and this is generally, with public comments always the case, like to just schedule a time to touch base one-on-one, and we can kind of get a better sense of what some of those concerns are, and then I can sort of bring that back to the full advisory council alongside all the other considerations with these due dates as we work toward, by the end of the year, hopefully adopting a clear set of interim due dates. Soraya, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt Katie's time since this is public forum time. I think I'm not sure that I actually got an answer to my question on like where the agencies are in terms of timeline. I know that there's like an extension, but I guess I'm curious as to like what they're working on and if they have any deadlines. Because to some extent, I assume we're working to a longer deadline regardless of what I guess where are they on like when do they think that they'll have their plans regardless of the deadlines?
At this point, the earliest assumed time that agencies would have the community engagement plans as defined in the Vermont EJ law is July 1st of 2025. That was the original due date. So already still fairly far out. And it's a great example of a date that we might be like, you know what, we're not actually going to give you 2 more years on that. Even though the statute allows for it, but we actually would like to see at least the first iteration of your plans on that date. And again, all of this will have to just iterate over time. It's just the nature of policy work, but yeah, that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
And with the other short-term deliverable, which is for covered agencies, is the 3-year look back on environmental benefit spending. So the original law requested that the Agency of Natural Resources put together guidance by November 15th of 2023, and we have a task group that's actively working on that, but it also requires a 40-day public comment period. So there's absolutely no way that guidance is going to be done by then. I also want to give some context. We told the legislature at the beginning of the spring, we will have a minimum of a 2-month extension on every single one of these short-term due dates because you all failed to authorize per diem payments and didn't get your full advisory council members named in time. So we're already started working. I just want to name, we're already working on a deficit of time. So part of this recalibration accounts for that. And then there's how much additional time do we think we need to do the work in a quality way. So the guidance that—
Sorry, Phoebes, I want to go back to Katie and ensure that her comment is complete.
Great, yeah, thanks.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Carla.
Okay, thank you.
Great, so Katie, if you want to, I think I might already have your contact information, but I will follow up with you by email if that works for you in terms of being able to touch base on this more in detail.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Great. All right, so I know Soraya just said she needed to step away for a call. We had scheduled to take just like a quick break after public comment. Is that desired? We're only going till noon, or would you all like to just kind of keep rolling? It's really Walter and Mariana, your determination. I see Maria's off screen. Oh, there you are. Okay. Yeah, take a little break. Okay, great. So let's regroup.
I'm just munching on something, but I could be listening if we want to keep on rolling. It's up to you all. I don't mind.
Yeah. I know the time is cruising, so I just wanted to respect that as well. And we're not bogging ourselves down in a 3-hour, 4-hour meeting the same way. But you know what, since Raya's on a call anyway, why don't we just take 5? Let's regroup at 11:15. It'll give me a second to sort of actually put together some takeaways from our call so far, and maybe we can just regroup on where we're at. All right. Invite folks to start trickling back. If you're not already back behind your screen, we've got about 45 minutes left in our conversation. And yeah, and I feel like we've already covered a lot of great stuff. So maybe we can just take a minute and regroup. Yeah, I think both agenda topics are pretty intertwined, clearly. So, I don't think we need to switch headspaces, just kind of continue refining what we've been talking about already. Which I think just my takeaways are, in order to sort of answer the questions in our agenda today, we need to make sure we're clarifying the financial resources available and also the specifics of when this council, and by extension, the folks you represent, would be and should be weighing in on agency decision making. That, in terms of spending the funds, there are questions. It sounds like there's a desire for just like, let's start taking some action and start trying some things on and moving some things forward. And some of that can be done directly, just us collaborating with you all and spending funding the way we see fit. But the other pathway for that is having a contract with a community-based organization or organizations. I think it could be multiple. We could put out a general request and take on multiple community-based organizations as contractors who have different ways of supporting engagement, which could be a nice way to sort of spread that resource. But as we said earlier, that piece is, well, it's optional to do it. It is the only way we currently have to be able to pay stipends for paid community forums. So that's another piece to talk about. There is thinking about having a task group that can sort of pick up the pieces of communications, get more into the weeds of mapping out the networks that we're already connected to through the advisory council. And I just want to mention that Sophie, who's on this call, basically that is her core responsibility for the Climate Action Office, is to sort of map out where there are community events taking place and networks of people to tap into to discuss climate policy issues. So there's a ton of overlap between what she's doing and what we're talking about doing. So another example of where we might have more support, to think about identifying where we could tap into communities. And then, I think the piece that I'm hearing is, from Soraya in particular, is we need to then think about a structure of some sort of buddy system where we're matching up advisory council and interagency committee members to build relationships and set themselves up to be sort of the conduit for influencing agency policies along the way as they start to work through all these different deliverables. And of course, there is the outstanding question of our public meetings and what do we want to have happening? What do we want our meetings to be? What do we want to see happening during our public meetings? And to what extent do we want those to be spaces that are, more about internal planning versus a space where we actually can have members of the public come and be engaged in, more substantive policy conversations. So those are just some of the big themes of decision points that we're sort of mulling around and thinking about. And we have 40 minutes left. So, I think once again, I'd love to just sort of open the floor to you all to hear what aspect of this conversation, you want to keep getting into or discussing, and just what's top of mind with everything we've talked about so far. If anyone wants to jump in. And Carla, I see your hand up as well. Go ahead.
Thank you, Phoebes. And that was a fantastic summary of, I think, where the conversation has gone, which I found really helpful as a representative of the interagency, as a member of the interagency committee. I wanted to pick up Soraya's question regarding deadlines for the interagency members, and with regard specifically to the community engagement plan, in the context of the question before us regarding the recalibration of the deadlines. And 2025 would be the deadline for the community engagement plan. And I would like to provide sort of some context to the things that would need to be in place based on the principles that were identified and are drafted to guide the creation of those plans. And a step that's foundational for any community engagement plan is language access. And so even though that is not contemplated in the law itself, it's most definitely a task that agencies would have to take on as part of the creation of the community engagement plan. So then when we think about the already recalibrated deadline, we've had basically like a several months delay. And then when we think about the steps, the foundational steps that are needed to actually have an effective community engagement plan, we're looking at the creation of a language access plan for the agencies, the creation of procedures to implement those language access plans, business office procedures to allow for the disbursement of funds that would be used to translate materials, vital documents, activation of state contracts. The operationalizing of the principles is a question that the interagency members raised, and some advisory council members underscore is the principles exist as guidance document as a guidance to the creation of these documents, but are we going to take the time to actually operationalize them and make recommendations on how agencies will take that information and include it as part of their work? So we're already seeing that 2025 for community engagement plan really requires a lot of other steps that the agencies will definitely need to work on and have in place before the actual creation of the community engagement plans. And so this recalibration would actually allow us, the two bodies, to come up with a work plan, a work process that would allow the agencies to ensure that the creation of the deliverables is done effectively. And so I just wanted to offer some context to, when we say, yeah, this is the deliverable, there are so many things that we need to do before that. And then the role of the advisory council with regards to those interim steps that need to be put in place.
Thanks, Carla. Yeah, so that speaks again to just trying to map out what these sort of what is it actually going to take for a covered agency to get from principles to plan, accounting for everything that's really contemplated in those principles, and then when does it make sense for you all to be engaged in those processes, right? Is sort of the key thing. At what stage in their drafting and development process do you all want to make sure you have a seat at the table, which also means a pathway to bring other folks you represent to the table as well as feels appropriate. So yeah, again, it's anything in this sort of body of potential next steps that feels like it'd be nice to sort of like refine or get into more detail around from what we talked about so far.
I wanted to go back to the idea of Soraya of working on buddy system. That's like a great idea too. Just that, like whatever is needed from us to move that forward seems like a great step. Also, I think while things fall into place, we could also potentially see, I mean, unless we want to go over these things again, but I don't know if anybody else has anything else to add right now or maybe later, but in the meantime, we could also think about a plan for next year so that we don't struggle so much figuring out when we are meeting. So
Yes.
we could start collecting right now, like you have 3 members here, and we could say, yeah, for next year, I don't know, the first Monday of the month, whatever it is that we want to start collecting some feedback to maybe map out all our next year. So that will be out of the picture, and within those meetings that we meet with the interagency committee, we could have breakout rooms to work with our peer, because I remember Soraya saying, how much else can we, the counselors, do without being compensated? For some of them, it'll be a real barrier to meet, to have these meetings that are joint meetings or just our own meetings, and also meet on a buddy system, like one-on-one with agencies. So maybe we could divide our meetings in 2 chunks. One could be all together as a forum, and then breakout rooms, and start developing these relationships one-on-one. Just a few steps that I thought of as just sharing information.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that intersection as well of the public meetings and the policy conversations, and can we set ourselves up to make that happen together, you know? And I agree. I would love to, my primary goal, if of all the things I would love to see happen, it would be for us to like have a vision for those meetings for 2024 set in advance. And to that end, actually, just I want to plant this seed while this topic's up. I was speaking with Michael Fernandez, who's been at a number of our public meetings. He manages the Bennington Conservation District. And he and I have he's wanted to host you all at like one of your public meetings in Bennington. And he and I talked a couple weeks ago about what that might look like in the first quarter of 2024. And and I think it could be a model for how we could set ourselves up, that maybe at least once a quarter we have a sort of longer, really intentional, like engagement focused sort of meeting that is geographically based. Potentially we could rotate. Oh great, hi Soraya, welcome back. We just are sort of regrouping from our conversation and thinking about which of the tangible next steps we might want to get into in detail. And Mariana was bringing up her interest in talking about your buddy system idea, but also maybe thinking about how our public meetings, and if we scheduled that out for 2024, could be set up as a way that they can be forums for things like buddy group conversations for community engagement. And so that's where we're at right now. And I was just sharing that Michael Fernandez, who runs the Bennington Conservation District, offered to sort of pilot what it could look like to do like a regional based day long, you know, kind of full day thing where you're hosting your public meeting, but it could have, you know, more intentionally invite members from a particular area to speak to their challenges. You know, it could, I think thinking through just getting creative on what these meetings could actually involve beyond just like the business that we tend to get into. Or maybe we break it up. Once a quarter, it's more focused on like policy and engagement issues, and the other quarters, it is our internal business, and we can rotate. So that's where we're at. We're kind of in that brainstorming mode. So I'll stop. And Mariana, if you want to add anything more, Zora, please jump in. And yeah.
Yeah, if I can add something, I love that. I love that that is a go between. I also, because we just get paid a flat fee per meeting, right?
Yeah, it's currently $250 a day if you have of the hours. Any hours outside of that time gets prorated at an hourly rate of $6.25.
Okay, great. I thought it was $50 a meeting, so $250. I think.
Did I say 250? Did I just say that? Was that real? This is me living in the future I want to be in. Apologies, manifestation magic. No, it's $50 a day. We are fighting for $250 a day. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
It's still currently $6.25. Yeah.
But I do think, I don't know if this is for like the December 18th meeting or how much we have on the agenda, but I actually think that if we could carve out an hour from that, like if we could decide between now and then, like what we might want to do for buddy system, like do some like ranked choice voting or like preference voting for like what folks think that they want to do, and then carve out an hour that meeting to just talk to those agencies and being like, what is your plan? Like, how should we plug in? And just have those conversations on an individual basis rather than a high level basis. I love that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
thanks for that suggestion.
Yeah, that meeting agenda has not been set. So there's definitely a lot of flexibility there. And we're trying to make it virtual in person again, or in-person hybrid with virtual. So yeah, I think in my head, as we've been talking about this concept, I keep thinking about the fact that there are some like, it could be, I guess I want your feedback on this. We could try to match advisory council members to every one of the 11 covered agencies, or this buddy system can also like buddy up the agencies a little bit, because there is some crossover themes, right? Like it might make sense to have the Agency of Natural Resources, in the room with the, Conservation Resource Board, who essentially just are we work hand in hand on policy issues all the time, right? So if you're talking about policy influence and things, those could be grouped. So I'm curious about that too, if it makes sense to sort of like boil ourselves down in some ways to like, instead of 11 different little buddy groups, maybe 4 or 5. So the agencies also can team up a little bit and share, and it can be a little bit policy thematic, potentially, how we do that.
Yeah, I was just typing on the chat. Maybe we could have 2 agencies with 2 counselors, and that reduce everything to 6. I mean, 12, 11, yeah, to 5, and maybe one can have an extra agency, an extra counselor, something that makes sense. And I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe housing and transportation makes sense. Maybe, I don't know, I cannot remember all of them, but something that makes sense. And yeah, then we will have less groups.
I think not to like, but it's like if we were going to have one, like you said, I think there was not counting Susanna.
Office of Racial Equity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could drop that one if we wanted to. Because I think maybe that's not, I think we could drop that one and have it be like 10 to 10. And I also don't think that it has to be this 2 people. Like, I don't think that the 2 people who do one agency also have to do another agency together. It could be, right, it could be like one person does A and B and another person does B and C. That makes sense.
I just want to make sure I'm hearing you fully. So you're saying still have there be like 10 buddy groups, 1 for each agency, and then matching that up to one of the 10 counselors. So it is like a 1-to-1 match. Is that your suggestion?
I don't think so.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Help me.
Yeah, I think I'm saying if there's 10 agencies and 10 counselors, each one doing 2 still means like each one doing 2 agencies still means that that there will be 2 people on the council per agency, but that it's not necessarily like Mariana, Anna, and I might not be doing like transportation and housing together, but we might both be on housing, and then I'm on transportation and she's on like A&R or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it.
Does that make sense, Mariana? Hello.
Yeah, I guess there's so many different possibilities, and everything is probably going to make sense. There's just different ways to go about it, and I'm flexible with anything that we decide as a group. I was just thinking that maybe it is a little bit, there's a little bit more crossover if we have, and also more depth if 2 against 2,
That's a good point.
There will be different perspectives, and then we can build. And it's also a little less intimidating to begin with, as opposed to be grouped with, you as a counselor with 1 agency member. You know,
Right,
the,
saying that, I think we're saying the same thing, but slightly, we're still saying 2 to 2. But like, I'm
right,
still
one on
saying we're doing 2, but I think you're saying those 2 people have the same 2 agencies, so that like the agencies are also in a buddy system. Whereas I'm saying you still have 2 people for each agency, but you don't have, Philo, leave it. Sorry, he's chewing my shoe. But you don't, but those 2 people aren't necessarily covering the same 2 agencies, so that, you know, like if every person's doing 2, that means that there's still 2 counselors per agency, right? So transportation would still have Mariana and the Reverend. A&R would have Zoraya and the Reverend, and the third one would have Mariana and Zoraya. Does that make sense? But I think logistically, it might be easier to also pair the agencies, because then when we set aside an hour, we'd have a conversation around, like, as opposed to being like, okay, half hour is this scramble, and the next half hour is a different scramble.
right.
Yeah.
I agree. I think the first option you mentioned makes sense, to have more diversity and variety and rotation and no crossover knowledge, but it'll be logistically a little bit more complicated. Whereas if we pair 2 and 2 and we make these little groups to at least maybe for 6 months, maybe the next 6 months we switch and we all learn and bring different perspectives to the conversations. So we can all take. So all the counselors, if we do a rotation every period of time, all counselors can have a set of eyes in the different work that the agencies are doing. And the same thing, the agencies can receive perspective from a different set of eyes. But if we switch too much, it may be too scrambly. And then, you know, who's saying what at what point? What was your name?
We finally got
Whereas-
to agreement
yeah.
on this, and now there's a new, yeah. But I mean, that'll also be appropriate. Yeah, good. But yes, I think generally a model of two people per agency.
Yeah, and also we will have to hear what other people think. You know, this is just the 2 of us. Who knows what?
Yeah,
This is great. I can write up both things, because I'm clear now, like, got it. So it's like there's always 2 counselors per agency. It's just whether or not those 2 counselors are the same for 2 agencies, and that's it, you know, versus, yeah. So, and I think even if you do the 2 to 1, where there's 10 relationships essentially that are established, you could still have, like, when we get together, we group up this way and, you know, make it work that way. So so there's flexibility there. So I'm happy to sort of write up both things, and I'll bring this to the interagency committee too, because they might have some thoughts from like their experience of like, don't put us together. We operate way too differently anyway. It would be a waste of folks' time to try to do that. You know, they might have some helpful thoughts on what makes sense as the folks who know how the policy side of decision making is happening. Yeah, Carla.
Yes, and as we think about this structure, the body system structure, which I think is great, thinking about how then those communications between counselors and agencies are going to get shared. So thinking about what kind of communication paths will be created to support the sharing, so that we're not operating in silos. And if there are other folks who have opinions with regards to the internal dynamics that are being created and the recommendations, there's opportunity to expand that pool of knowledge that's being created amongst those individuals. So also thinking about you know, what kind of communication structure would make sense to share.
Yeah, definitely. Great. So,
And Steve, one more
yeah,
thing.
Go ahead.
When you mentioned Michael and his idea of coming to Bennington, just if I wanted to share that Hunger Free Vermont has established 10 hunger councils across Vermont, in which partners and community organizations and members of the public join some councils are monthly, some are every other month, and some are virtual, and some are hybrid or in person. So those are also a great network and great spaces for if we decide that we want to visit, or also for our own communication and outreach engagement with folks. I mean,
That's
at some
great.
point, yeah,
Yeah.
somebody says that we should mention what are the places where we can communicate with the people that we represent, and I think those are great spaces. And these councils are connected with most community organizations that are doing groundwork, and they will be very good to create a spider web, spread the word and engage folks.
Right. Yeah, I think it could be, it'd be really powerful to hold for, like quarterly regional events in collaboration with partners on the ground, and, whether that is the hunger councils, the conservation districts, both. And really, using that time to hear from and do some this is also, think about the agenda for those meetings. How can, to your point, Mariana, not have those meetings be when we're like in the weeds on a guidance document or something, but actually say like, hey, we would love to use and like invite you in for an hour of this time and to really help us think about what are the environmental burdens in your region that should be included in our mapping tool. Like, we could ask more substantial, meaningful questions, or we could offer an educational opportunity on something, programming that's available. We could plan in advance to say, we want to, make sure our interagency committee partners put together a list of resources for the region that we can bring to that event. So it's not just give us information, but let's give you information. Because again, I know it feels like the work is like, when will the work start? Well, it's happening every day. Environmental justice is happening, or injustice is happening every day that government's operational, working. People are out there doing engagement, they're making policy decisions, they're putting out grant opportunities that people do or do not know about. So, I don't want this extension on the due dates to make it sound like we can't do anything meaningful around in community environmental justice now. We can and need to. There was an impetus for that before the law was passed, quite frankly. So, if those 4 regional events can be those sort of like, let's have some substantive, meaningful conversations with members of the public in these different regions. I'm also wondering if on some of the other meetings, and perhaps those are meetings that Center Advisory Council meeting, we sort of center you all in those, but maybe on the other 4 can be sort of more agency focused. And that could be a different meeting where we meet, let's say, at the Department of Housing, and the buddy group for housing sort of helps set the agenda. Maybe we could spend more time on buddy issues, so that again, we're not asking people to do a buddy meeting separate from a public meeting, but it's both and. We're having our public meeting, but we're doing it at a place and on a day and in a location where we're also able to do these other things that we said are important, and get into some substance. So that's been sort of in the back of my mind in this conversation, sort of affirming that might be a helpful way to go. That'd be 8 meetings. And then I think the other 4 could be like, let's do our internal process. Let's make it, like, do the other boring stuff that's less about community engagement and input and more about us just making sure we're procedurally doing what we need to do and feel good about that.
Yeah, to all. And one more thing, as we think of ways to start sharing and promoting and outreaching about these meetings, whatever the form and shape they will take, we could, and I thought of this as you were saying what you were saying. These things are happening right now, and we are doing the work that we need to be doing right now. So when we send out, I mean, I am already doing this. I'm sending out information to the hunger councils that the listservs for the hunger councils have about 1,000 people registered. And I, of course, we don't know who reads that, but I'm inviting people to our meetings, and we could, for each invitation that we do to a meeting, we could put at the bottom of that outreach a quick sentence. Do you know what an environmental burden is? Define it and put a link to a survey right there. Please tell us one environmental burden. So let's do micro, like if we are little ants, instead of thinking of getting input in these big forums and these big places, let us just gather little pieces of feedback in each thing that we do. I mean, I'm always sending communications, and I continue to always sending communications. And of course, not everything will be about this and environmental justice, but for everything that we send out that has to do with our meetings, we could at the bottom says, like little learning knowledge, learning corner, and one question. Give us one question. You cannot attend a meeting, don't worry, answer this one question and we'll take it into consideration. Something more inviting, like we all receive so many emails and they're also mostly dreadful. So if we, in a good way, you know what I mean? Like there's all this but if we use friendly, quick language, simple language, I bet people will be more willing to give us what we need little by little.
I love that idea. I think that's a really thoughtful way to do that. Sort of like the micro communications, more regular, less burdensome, easier to engage with. They could be really powerful. And to your point also, like we could really be getting some useful data along the way, so that when we reach these points of, hey, we need to think this through, we can already pull up survey data that's relevant and have a starting point. Awesome. I think the communications and engagement task group will be really valuable. I appreciate you bringing that idea forward. And there's right now, there's, in my head, I'm sort of thinking through task group wise. That one, the community engagement task group. And I would like that to not just fall on the advisory council's shoulders. I think we should invite some interagency committee members into that task group who do a lot of work on engagement and could bring resources to bear. And then we already have actually a task group that's sort of focused on the environmental benefits guidance and the reporting and the agency requirements. Awesome. Thank you, Mariana. And I think there will need to be a third group that's focused more on the environmental burdens and mapping and that piece of the equation that we haven't put together yet, but that's just a huge part of the work that will need to get carried forward. And so those three sort of feel like an obvious, like, of course, there's three major bodies of work that we're responsible for: community engagement, environmental benefit distribution, and environmental burden distribution. So those are our three main task groups. I'm also kind of considering whether a fourth group that's focused more on procedural justice and just like the behind, kind of like a steering committee, right? Like when is our meeting schedule? How are we ensuring that we're supporting ourselves? Hey, we need to fight for per diems for the legislature. That group would think about something like that. Our timelines, our due dates, so those sort of behind the scenes, gory things that are necessary, but not necessarily the policy work itself. And so I think my hope is that, again, a lot of hopes, but December 18th, we can kind of come together and say, great, this is who we are. We have these task groups, we have this buddy system, and we have this vision of our 2024 meeting schedule and how that work fits into it, and trying to sign off on that. Awesome. Okay, great. Yeah, I know we're down to our last. Yeah. Yes, that's my hope. And it's a party. There'll be good food. some music, some hanging out after. I'm trying to find a nice venue. Yeah, that's exactly the vibe I'm going for. And we're just at a kind of the last 9 minutes of our meeting, so welcome. Any sort of last thoughts, or please bring this to the interagency committee meeting, or please put this down on paper so we can make it official, or, next step suggestions. Fantastic. Thank you, Walter. That'd be great. Fantastic. Okay.
If there's nothing pending for this last 10 minutes, I'll need to head out a little sooner, unless we need to give any last feedback.
I feel like you've given ample feedback. It's more if there's just any kind of concluding thoughts or next steps that you want to make sure don't get lost. But otherwise, you're welcome to, head off early, and appreciate so much all that you brought to this meeting. Really generative conversation.
Thank all of you. And yeah, I'm sorry to head out a few minutes early. I gotta enter another meeting and I need a minute.
Totally understood.
See you all. Thank you.
Yeah, Zariah or Walter, any last thoughts that you have? Or okay, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Oh, actually, sorry, I've got one more question, Phoebes, which I'm sorry if this was, but where did the last conversation end with the other group?
On Monday, it was wow, a different kind of conversation. We didn't get nearly as like into specific recommendations as you all did, so I think they'll benefit from hearing some of these conversations. But yeah, I'm gonna put together, now that we've had this meeting, I'm gonna put together a summary email with like notes from both meetings, recordings to both meetings, and then like my just like quick summary of like, here's what you all talked about on Monday, here's what we talked about on Wednesday, here's where there's overlap, and here's what we'll pick up when we get together again. My brain's trying to pull up the specifics of all that we got into, and having a hard time doing that on the fly right now. That's real. Yeah.
Thanks, Phoebes. I don't have anything
Yeah,
else.
of course. Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Zariah,
Bye,
Walter,
thank
Carla.
you.
Take care.
Bye.